welcome to everyone. Welcome to you all. It's great to be able to see each other and be together in this way. Happy Father's Day to the fathers here and to all the fathers around and everywhere. I had the opportunity this weekend. I was sharing with some of the early folks to go to New York to see my daughter and her husband and my grandkids for the first time since the pandemic began. So I normally go every month for a few days, but this is the first time in 3 months. So that was a very joyful experience. And we did an early celebration of Father's Day. And things are almost back to normal. The roads are almost as busy as they were before. Not quite, but not quite the jams getting in and out of New York. But nonetheless, things are, at least in this part of the world, kind of fairly back to normal and doing fairly okay in terms of the virus, although that can't be said for everywhere. So welcome again to everyone. I want to share a few reflections as we begin today, again, about kind of the time we're living in. And the theme of just these short reflections is that action absorbs anxiety. And if you're familiar with that expression, I think it's from Angeles Ariane. Action absorbs anxiety. How many of us have felt anxious at all in these recent days and weeks and months? My guess is probably all of us at different times, maybe some of us a lot of the time. I've just been, following in the papers just some of the reports. I think I mentioned last week a report that there'd been a spike. The number of people reporting feeling anxious or depressed tripled in a few weeks with all that's going on. I also saw that in a recent survey just a couple of weeks ago, they found that Americans' level of happiness had fallen to its lowest level in 50 years. And if people saw that, it's kind of really quite interesting. And obviously, there are a lot of conditions that contribute to people feeling unhappy or less happy or depressed. And it's interesting, though, because the studies of happiness, particularly work by Sonia Lyubomirsky, suggest or tend to show that about 50% of our happiness is kind of the genetic preset, based on our genes and all of that. That just 10% is based on conditions, the changing conditions of our life. Something, we win the lottery and then we might feel happy for a while, but we tend to come back to fairly close to a kind of a set point. And similarly, if it goes in the other direction towards something more painful or more difficult. But what's optimistic about her research, and it certainly is borne out in Buddhist teachings and practices, is that a great deal of our happiness depends on what we do, how we meet our experience, our attitude, towards our life and towards our experience, and that we can actually affect by choosing how we pay attention and what we pay attention to, that we can really determine how much we suffer on one hand, or how much how much joy or how much happiness we experience. The Buddha, kind of well-known sutta or discourse said, whatever a person, a monk, a practitioner, and somebody who practices, whatever someone frequently thinks about and ponders on this becomes the condition of their mind. So if you think anxious thoughts and, fearful, fear comes up and you kind of proliferate the fear, that's what tends to fill the consciousness. And over time, that's, in a sense, that's who we become. There's a well-known saying, sow a thought, feed an act, sow an act, feed a habit, sow a habit, feed a character, sow a character, feed a destiny, that our thoughts and how we respond to our thoughts lead to our actions and ultimately lead to our destiny, similar to what the Buddha spoke about in terms of where we put our attention. So it's really critical where we put our attention, and how we respond to our experiences. Our thoughts will come up, anxious thoughts will come up. Busy thoughts will come up. But what really matters most is not what comes up, but how we meet what comes up. Do I meet a fearful thought with, more fearful thoughts and then build a kind of big scenario, catastrophize, for example, about what might happen? Or do I choose to say, okay, that's an anxious thought, and allow myself to feel it, experience the bodily feelings, let them come, let them go, but not throw fuel on the fire, as it were. And this is what our practice helps us to do, that we, as the Buddha says, we can train our minds, and nothing helps us more than a trained mind. And so this is what our practice helps us to do. And, in terms of the time we're living in, there's certainly more than enough things to make us feel, anxious. It's an anxious time, anxious. Some of you may have heard that there's an election happening in November of this year, that, very easily the mind goes to anxiety about it. Somebody sent me an email and said, do you still see people one-on-one? Because my mind is just proliferating about what if this happens? I think many of us know what this is, what this scenario might happen. And maybe it doesn't look as likely as it did a few months ago, but who knows what can happen. And, can we hold those anxieties in a wise and kind, skillful way? There's more than enough to be anxious about with everything going on with the virus. Particularly if we're a certain age, or we're have underlying health conditions, or have family members who do. There's lots to worry about, lots to be concerned about. But again, it's kind of how do we hold these experiences? The economic situation as well. There's still tens of millions of people out of work, and a lot of people may be in a kind of iffy position of, well, it might happen to me. So again, lots of room to be anxious. But the theme I wanted to kind of focus a little on this morning is the way that action absorbs anxiety. I find myself in a time, particularly around the political stuff, if I'm not, doing something, it is possible. If I, if I'm watching more news and, shows on TV, I find myself getting kind of more tense and more stressed about things. And the more I can channel those natural anxieties and those fears into action, the more the more resilient I feel, the more kind of balanced and equanimous I feel. That it's like choosing where that energy goes. I share sometimes that the term Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who written a lot of books about flow states, talks about attention as psychic energy. Psychic energy. When we put our attention somewhere, we're putting our psychic energy into that. So it's a good question to ask ourselves. where am I putting my psychic energy, on a day-to-day level, on a moment-to-moment level? Am I putting my kind of investing that psychic energy into worrying, fretting, being anxious, being fearful, or distracting myself? Or am I putting that psychic energy into just being present for what's here, being present for my loved ones and colleagues, and and that's a choice we can make, but we have to be aware to make that choice. We have to be present to even be aware often that we have a choice. And so when we think about action absorbing anxiety, I think one of the wonderful kind of archetypes within the Buddhist tradition that can be very helpful for us, I think particularly at times like these, but really at any time, is the archetype of the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva, the meaning is simply two words: Bodhi meaning awakening, Sattva meaning an awakening being, a being committed to waking up, to living freely, to living free of suffering, but not just for themselves, but for all beings. And traditionally in Buddhism, the Bodhisattva has been seen as, somebody who's done all of the work to free themselves from suffering, to pass from this kind of world of suffering, of samsara, as it's called, but who stays around in this realm until all beings are liberated, until all beings are awakened. That's kind of the ideal, if you like. But I think it's helpful to think of it in simpler terms, as someone who is committed to freedom for themselves and for others. It's a quality of heart, of compassion, of caring for ourselves and for others, for all beings, and committed to their freedom, to their well-being, to their happiness. And I think it's it's helpful to invite ourselves to think about what it would mean to be a bodhisattva, to think of ourselves, and the more we practice letting go where we're clinging, the more the separation between ourselves and others tends to break down. And that self, the problematical sense of self that we often have, is very much tied to clinging, is tied to unwholesome, unskillful relationships with the way things are. And the more we can see into those and let them go, the more what naturally opens is our connection, our understanding, our insight into the interconnectedness of ourselves and all beings. And what flows naturally from that is a wish to alleviate suffering. And the bodhisattva ideal, if you like, is kind of one of the deepest expressions of that wish to heal suffering, our own and of all beings. Jack Cornfield, in his book The Wise Heart, a wonderful book on Western and Eastern psychology, talks about three qualities of a bodhisattva. First, he says the bodhisattva accepts the truth of their situation. And we can see this as a kind of a paradigm, as it were, for our own practice. Accepting the truth of our experience or our situation. This is what we do in meditation, or we invite ourselves to do, is whatever is present, we say, it's like this. This moment is like this. This tightness is like this. This sadness I'm feeling is like this. We accept it as the truth. And we turn towards, He says that we turn towards the difficulties and shine the light of understanding on them. So we turn towards what's difficult, what's painful, and we open to it. And this is what we do in our practice. We talk a lot about welcoming the guests, something that's difficult, challenging, or that's pleasant. We bring this attitude of kindness and acceptance to them. We kind of open space for whatever is here to be experienced, to be held with kindness. So we turn towards the difficulties, we open to the truth of our experience. And the second quality is to work to find peace within ourselves by two practices, really. One is to let go of painful and afflictive states. So to see where we're holding on, where we're caught up in anger or greed or hatred or worry. And we see that, and in seeing it and allowing ourselves to experience that, the energy of that fully, we can let that go. We can abandon, as the Buddha says, abandon what is unskillful. So that's what we do. The first step is really, or one of the two practices, is to let go of painful and afflictive states. And the second is to develop positive ones like love and compassion, generosity, gratitude, loving kindness, equanimity. We consciously incline the mind in that direction or in these directions towards what is wholesome, towards what is beneficial, towards what leads us to happiness and to well-being. The Buddha talked about this as cultivating the good. So abandoning what's unskillful and cultivating the good. So this is the way we find peace within ourselves. So we cultivate peace within ourselves. And the third quality of the Bodhisattva, Jack says, is to envision actions and a path of liberation for ourselves, for our community, and for our world. So that's really, the third is kind of the key to the action or the steps that we take. And we can ask ourselves, if I looked at my life and this time in my life, my experience, and you look at this time in your life, your experience, what would it mean to envision a path of freedom for yourself, for your community, for your world? Jack says, envisioning has enormous power. With our vision and imagination, we can help create the future. Envisioning sets our direction, marshals our resources, makes the unmanifest possible. So our tendency much of the time is when we experience something, we kind of think of, this is how things are right now, or how I am right now. We take some experiences as kind of reality. If I'm feeling, I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling kind of heavy and grumpy, it's very, can be very natural just to kind of like, well, that's how it is. That's how things are. And we just kind of carry that grumpiness into our day, or unsettledness or some other feeling. But with some awareness and some kindness, we can look at that state and say, is this a wise use of my energies to act this out, to play it out? What would be a more helpful way of responding and being in this moment? And so we can choose our responses, choose our way, as it were, as Viktor Frankl said, the last of the human freedoms, to choose our way. So if we find ourselves, let's say we're meditating or in our daily lives, and we notice, we're beating ourselves up or being self-critical or judgmental. Oh, there I go again. I'm always screwing up. Oh, what a loser I am. Easily we can kind of spin out these kind of negative self-views, self-judgment. But with awareness, we can see, okay, I'm noticing I'm doing that. And we could choose to replace that thinking, that unskillful or unhelpful thinking, self-judgment, self-criticism, beating ourselves up, with self-compassion. We say, may I be kind to myself, or just wishing ourselves kindness, that we can, I talk about this as changing the channel. We can choose to change the channel. We can choose to shift from kind of a more negative ways of thinking that lead to suffering towards more beneficial ways of thinking that lead to happiness, that lead to well-being. You know, if I find myself caught up in wanting something I don't have, you know, feeling of craving or missing or needing, I want this, I need this, whatever it is, you know, maybe it's we want to buy something, some new electronic gadget that our minds become fixated on, or a car, or a piece of clothing, or some food, or whatever, that a mind gets fixated on that. We can choose to shift our attention from there and say, okay, noticing those energies, let myself feel them, let them come, let them go. And shift our attention, shift the spotlight inward, and take some moments to reflect on gratitude. You know, what are those things in my life that I feel grateful for? So rather than the fixation being on what I don't have, which the mind can easily get caught up in, we let the attention come to what I already have, what I appreciate, what I'm thankful for, what I'm grateful for. And if you try doing this, you might experience a very significant change. I do when I do this. If I have the presence of mind to say, okay, I'm noticing this, and I shift the attention inward and just think of perhaps 2 or 3 things in my life, loved ones, people, situations, you know, we have more than enough. Even if we're going through hard times, there's things that we can come back to, you know, loved ones in our lives, or a comfortable and secure place to live, or perhaps our health, that we can come back and appreciate that. So easy to kind of lose connection with that and get fixated on what we don't have. So coming back to choosing, the ideal or the archetype of the Bodhisattva is really the embodying of an intention of compassion. So I invite you to think about in your own life, what would be a way to engage in the world in a compassionate way. You know, it doesn't have to be political action. It could be towards a loved one or towards people in your life that really shifts, that manifests, if you like, that manifests that compassion and caring, going outwards for others. And if you begin with somebody close to you, you could go out wider and wider, including even the difficult people. What might that look like in your life? And is that something, is that image, is that ideal or archetype something that might be helpful for you in your own life? What would it mean to be a bodhisattva, to choose to embody that archetype, if you like? And I think finally, to kind of winding this reflection up, would point to people in really from many, many different traditions that embody this spirit, this intention of the Bodhisattva. And I've thought a lot about, people like Nelson Mandela, spending 27 years in prison, most of them on Robben Island, and how he actually did what Jack's 3 qualities kind of speak about, of kind of accepting the truth of his situation and actually transforming his own heart from anger, righteous anger, if you like, but into forgiveness of those who were, harming him and his colleagues on Robben Island, but also those who were, instituted and carried out the oppressive system of apartheid, that he came to see them as human beings with whom he and they could negotiate, and was able through his own practice to envision a way out of this highly, highly oppressive system towards one that was, has a lot of work to do, but is representative of the majority, of everyone in the country now, through the settlement, through the negotiations there. And I think of, obviously think of Martin Luther King, speaking about, his inclusion of even those who were causing harm, the segregationists in the South and all those who supported them during the civil rights movement, and how his, the idea was, the goal was not to destroy or, defeat them, in any personal way, but actually to win them over. And as he said, we'd have a double victory when we change the hearts of those who are carrying out the oppression. We win a victory not just for our people, but in changing the hearts of those who are actually causing suffering. We think of Rosa Parks and John Lewis and so many others, as well as those within the Buddhist tradition, the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh and others. And before we get into the meditation, I wanted to just share a short video with you. I've talked a little bit in the classes in recent weeks about a program, and I'm not going to go into the program right now, but where a number of us are actively engaged, absorbing our anxiety by getting involved in the electoral process and focusing a lot of our energy and our time on the state of Wisconsin, which is, very much seen by all as a battleground state. And just over a week ago, we had a webinar. Some of you on the call, in the class today were on that webinar. And it was extraordinary. Tara Brach, Jack Cornfield, Van Jones, as well as Lou Friedland and Ben Wickler talking about the situation in Wisconsin. What I want to share with you is this, just a 5-minute video, and hope that the technology gods are with us today. But this is from this is Van Jones. It's 5 minutes, and I think you'll find it quite powerful. So, sharing.
I'm glad that we're doing this week. If we had done this a week ago, I probably couldn't have been a part of it, just because there was so much heartbreak. I think the world saw something that's been happening in our country for centuries. It saw a black man lynched by a white man. That's what that was, that video. And it broke us. It broke the black community to watch something like that happen. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. He starts calling out for his mother. His mother's been dead for years. 6 minutes, urinating on himself, begging for his life. 15 times, I can't breathe. The community screaming in horror. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. These videos have been a part of American life now for almost 7, 8 years. It was always, oh, well, it was a quick decision. The cops got to defend himself. He was talking back. He was fighting back. What do you want? What do you expect? You can't second guess the police. But this one, filmed from beginning to end, stunned the world. And for all of the times that we have been lynched, we've never had a situation where 1 billion people could see it all at the same time on their smartphones. And it shoved a piece of glass into the eyeball of everybody on the planet, and it hurt them. People couldn't sleep having seen it. They couldn't rest. And if we had tried to have this conversation a week ago, we probably couldn't have had it. But a miracle is taking place. A miracle is taking place. A continent of new common ground has emerged from beneath the waves, where there are 20, 30, 40 million white Americans saying racism is real, more real than I thought. There's something wrong with our justice system. It's more broken than I knew. What can I do about it? As an African-American man, it's a miracle. It's all I've wanted. It's just an acknowledgement that what is happening, and that we need to do something about it. And now we're in the middle of something we don't know what it is. We don't even have a name for it. The civil rights movement wasn't called the civil rights movement at the beginning. At first, it was just people trying to fix a problem. And later on, they called it the civil rights movement. We don't know what this is. NASCAR says they're not going to let Confederate flags fly anymore. The NFL is apologizing for not supporting Colin Kaepernick's peaceful protests years ago when he was trying to call attention to this. You have people, corporations across the world saying Black Lives Matter. What is this? We don't know what to call this. 1964, they called it Freedom Summer when those students went south to register voters. Some were killed, some were beaten, but they changed history. But they didn't call it Freedom Summer then. They called it was 2 years later when a book came out called Freedom Summer. They didn't know they were in Freedom Summer. So we're in some awakening, some great awakening, where much more is possible than we had dared to hope for. Somebody killed a Black man, and everybody cares. It's a miracle. It's never happened. It's never happened. Somebody killed a Black man, and everybody cares. I wish my parents were here to see this.
We're in some great awakening. Someone killed a Black man and everyone cares. So what I'd like to do, I can have some sharing afterwards, just move into our meditation, initial meditation. So it'll take about 15 minutes. So invite you to just find a comfortable, relaxed posture. Sitting with your back straight. Inviting the shoulders to relax, letting the chest be open so you can breathe easily. Close your eyes if you'd like to do that. Let the attention come inward. You might take a few deeper breaths just to relax and help you settle into being here. Just being here, relaxed and aware. Just notice what's present for you right now. Notice what you're feeling in your body. Make space for whatever's present right now. Notice what's present in the mind and the emotions. Just hold whatever you're experiencing with kindness, with acceptance. Letting your awareness be like a container that can hold whatever's here. Welcome the guests, whatever's coming to visit right now. Just to make space for this feeling, this emotion, this thought. Letting it come, letting it be, letting it go. Let your let your breathing help you hold whatever you're experiencing. Just breathing into anything that might feel difficult or hard to hold or be with. You can also put your hand on your heart, on your belly, connecting with this life, with any difficulties that are present. In this moment, be a moment of peace, of joy. Of freedom. Nothing to hold on to, nothing to resist. And if it's helpful, using the breath as a kind of home base where you rest your attention and you come back to when the mind moves into thinking. Kind awareness of breathing. When you notice that your attention, your psychic energy is engaged in thinking, planning, remembering, daydreaming, just choose to let the attention come back, incline the mind back to the body, back to the breath, back to this moment. beginning again in any moment. This breath, this sound, this feeling, this moment, without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. This poem from Dorna Markova, I will not die an unlived life. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. So we'll take Nick, if we could have a little bit shorter, just given the time today, maybe 10 minutes, and maybe, I don't know, you decide in terms of numbers, maybe groups of 3. And if you'd like in the group to just share, what's present for you, what's up for you in these times, and if there's any way that you feel that you would like to show up in the world, this archetype of a bodhisattva in these times. And we'll come back and share a little bit more and have movement and then a final meditation. So thank you. It's kind of magic, these groups. One of the things I want to share, we're going to Emily will lead us in some movement in a moment. I just wanted to make a couple of things. If you'd like to share any reflections in the chat box about kind of what came up for you, obviously within confidentiality of what's appropriate to share, but anything came up for you from the groups or from the reflection and Van Jones reflections from the webinar. One of the things I wanted to mention is that the webinar raised $215,000, which was, I think everyone, Margaret, who's here, was part of the organizing group as well, and I think everybody was really kind of blown away by the response, people pledging monthly pledges. And what I'll share is there's a recording of the whole of the webinar. Jack and Tara's pieces were wonderful too, as were the presentations on Wisconsin itself. And I'll share the link for that in the chat box. So the whole thing is like 45 minutes with, if you can, I think there's some Q&A recorded afterwards, but the basic program was 45 minutes. And obviously ways of getting involved if you're interested in that too. Let's Emily, if you're ready, let's move into some movement. If you're there, we're not hearing you yet. Okay.
Yeah. It's all a process.
Thanks.
Moments, what seems to take moments. So if people would like to stand, find your feet, find how gravity is just lifting up one leg and putting it down, noticing the difference. And then inhaling, lifting your arms, reaching up, and allow your shoulders to drop down, and then cultivate the energy. Cultivate the sky, now sunshine at this moment here, and the clouds, and bring that energy to your heart. And then cultivate the energy of this gathering, the kindness, compassionate attitudes, and love, bringing that to your heart. And then cultivate the energy of the earth, that which nourishes and provides us with such abundance. And then coming into Cactus Arms, we'll be moving 3 times to the right, inhaling, exhale, right, and center, and right, and center, and right, and center. Deep inhale and left, and center, left, and center, and left, and center. Allow your hands to drop down and bring them up and down. Shake it out for a moment. And then extend your arms up again, grasping your right wrist in your left hand. Breathing in, tilt towards the left, breathing into the right side of the rib cage. Inhale back to center, switch wrists. Deep inhale and tilt to the right. Breathing into the left side of your rib cage. And back to center. Float those arms down. And then gather your hands behind your back. And extend your elbows, straightening, opening up the chest, lifting your head. And exhale back. And one more time, inhale, extend, lifting. And exhale back. Allow your hands again to just sway from side to side. Maybe lifting one heel up and the other. And now for the last movement, bring your hands above your knees onto your thighs. Inhale. Exhale, lower down your head, your back, shoulders, upper back, pressing on your feet to feel your earth and allowing and reaching down. Take a deep inhale here. Exhale with a sigh. Inhaling. Last time. And then bring your hands back above your knees. Press on your feet, bringing your tailbone under, bringing your hands to heart center, lifting up, reaching up, releasing to the sky, to this gathering and the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Lovely as always. Time-wise, I'm looking. Let's have, if we could, if maybe a couple of people would share, and feel free while we're sharing to add any thoughts or questions or anything you'd like to share in the chat box, and we'll share. We'll save that. We'll save the chat box, and if you'd like to raise your hand, if you'd like to share anything, can only see 25 at a time, and yeah, let's. I'm seeing, and you can use the reactions if you like. I'm just scrolling through. I think I see Rich. If you like to, you have your hand up, Rich from the DC area.
Just real quick, I had put a. I was speaking with Leslie in the breakout, and we talked about this Beethoven flash mob for the Ode to Joy, and I put the link in the chat for her, and for everybody who wants to see it. It's very uplifting in these times. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rich. And Alicia from Montgomery County, at least I'm assuming that's what MoCo is, has a hand.
Correct. Thanks, Hugh. And thanks, everybody. I just feel such a strong sense of camaraderie and community. But I wanted to say in the breakout session, we expressed concerns of, well, movement, that there is this momentum, but concerns that the police unions and those in power, there's a backlash, and wanting to be mindful of that in terms of keeping the momentum going, and Yeah, I shared something. I shared an organization in the chat. I'm still learning about this organization in terms of grassroots support for rising this country up. But if anyone's interested in looking into that, I wanted to offer that of how we can keep the momentum, trying to keep it going. So thank you. That's
really great. Thank you. And if anyone else, please feel free to share in the chat box if you have resources that are helpful. I personally, I definitely hope that what Van Jones was talking about. I hope that momentum continues. I've been very much encouraged by the diversity of the protests and the kind of the uprising, that something seems to have shifted in consciousness, and let's hope and let's work to make sure that actually leads to, continues to lead to further real change, and do everything we can for that. I'm thinking if there's one more, and then we'll, or if there isn't, we'll go into.
I think Bob has his hand up.
I'll be very, I can be very brief, Hugh. I just want to thank you for sharing that moving thing from Van Jones. But I think what he said, the message I took from what he said is of a piece with what you shared so eloquently with us. I think we all feel a lot of rage. And in my group, somebody used the word rage, and it's righteous rage. But you and he call us to compassion, and to action, and lastly to hope. And I want to thank you for that, because it's that transcending that you are bringing us to, I think, can make a difference to all of us and to the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Just time-wise, what I'm going to suggest is that we can continue the conversation in I think we could call it overtime, right? After the formal session is over, a few minutes after 12. Folks stay around if they have time to do that, and get some tea or coffee or some lunch, and continue the conversation or new conversation. So perhaps we could continue there and have time for a final meditation. So what I invite you to do again is just get comfortable. The main thing to start really is to kind of begin from, as much as we can, from a platform of ease and relaxation, because if we're tight and stressed, it's not easy for us to open to what's arising in the body, heart, and mind. So the more we can just relax and settle, the more then we can kind of, from a place of some balance, we can open to what's coming up, what's arising. So if it's helpful, just taking a few deeper breaths. The deeper breaths just help us shift from the kind of the more active mode into the more settled rest and digest, as it's called, mode of the nervous system, parasympathetic mode. And the smile can also help us, just inviting a smile. This too sends a message to our brain and to our nervous system that we can be at ease, we can relax. We don't need to be vigilant, tense. You might let your attention come into the body. It's easy for us to kind of get caught up in our thoughts, in our heads. So coming into feeling whatever you're experiencing right now, feeling the contact with the chair or the surface beneath you, your feet with the floor, your hands with whatever they're touching. Feel the sensations of breathing. The sensations of your skin in contact with the air around you, with your clothing. And letting your breathing help you settle into being here, as fully here as you can be. And see if you can invite a field of kindness towards your own experience, towards whatever's here right now. See if you can hold it with kindness, as though you're creating a space or a container of kindness for whatever's arising for you, that it can be held in this way, held with kindness. As you breathe in, you might breathe in a wish of kindness for yourself. And you could let your breathing be your home base if that's helpful to you. Just connecting with the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. And choosing to come back if the mind moves into plans or memories or worries, daydreams. Just gently and kindly. Coming back, beginning again. Just holding whatever is present for you right now with kindness, with acceptance. This moment without judgment. Can this moment be a moment of peace, of ease, of well-being? In these final minutes of the meditation, just invite you to recognize the challenge and the difficulties of the time that we're living in, and just invite you to be sure to take care of yourself and your well-being. The practice of self-compassion can be a powerful one. You might finish with just a breathing in, a wish of kindness to yourself. Just caring about this life, this being. Wishing to alleviate any suffering that you might be experiencing, This is the quality of compassion, to want to help, to end our own suffering and the suffering of others. Just that compassionate wish for yourself to be free of suffering. Might breathe that in, and you might breathe out a wish of compassion to someone else, someone who's experiencing pain or difficulties, maybe a group of people. As with the metta, the loving kindness practice, we can think of whole groups of people and wish them well. It could be all of those who are out on the streets protesting and demanding change. Could be those too who are fearful and are resisting change. Just wish that their hearts be opened. Just breathing out a wish of compassion. So breathing in kindness, compassion towards yourself. Breathing out compassion towards others and towards the world. All those who are experiencing pain, loss, and suffering in these times, in terms of their health, well-being, economic hardship, other types of anxiety and fear and depression. Just wishing that all be free of suffering. Finish with this poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, For Warmth. I hold my face between my hands. No, I am not crying. I hold my face in my two hands to keep the loneliness warm. Two hands protecting, two hands nourishing, two hands preventing my soul from leaving me in anger. So we'll finish with some announcements. I'll just share a couple of things I have coming up. One, by the way, I put the link to the full webinar in the chat box, so that's a little bit up from the bottom if you're interested in seeing all of that. If you'd like to do a somewhat longer practice, next Saturday I have a half-day retreat called Building Resilience to Weather the Storms. practices of mindfulness and loving kindness and compassion, equanimity. So that'll be I think 9:30, I think, to 1. I can't remember exactly the time, but around then, next Saturday. I also have a 4-day online meditation from Southern Dharma, which was down in North Carolina near Asheville. But we're doing it online. So that's July 22nd through 26th. And the third thing is, and I will share a link to this, is I have the group, a group that called Mindful Engagement 2020. This is the group that I co-lead with Kyra Jewel Lingo and George Kinder, and we have that monthly. We have our next meeting next Wednesday. And actually, I'm going to be talking more on this theme of the Bodhisattva in these times. So if you're interested in that, that's 12 noon on Wednesday, next Wednesday, and I'll find a link for that. And just remind everyone that there's not a charge for the class, a fixed cost, but if you'd like to give support, in this case to me, for help me to continue teaching, that's much appreciated. It's how the teachings have come down for 25 centuries, and a practice that we want to keep going, and it's a powerful one to kind of explore this gift of generosity. So thank you for your support.